Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of Breaking Limits, the podcast where parents of children with special needs who are done feeling overwhelmed and ready to feel empowered. I'm your host, Dr. Vivian Peer, physical therapist, coach, mentor, and advocate for families like yours. And joining me, my fierce mama, warrior parent, Emily Woods, who knows firsthand what it feels like to raise a child with special needs. And today, guys, we are talking about communication. More than words, how our kids speak without speaking, right?
Yes, this is a really exciting episode. Because let me tell you, the way that my daughter communicates is very similar to what a lot of other parents are dealing with. Minimal words, if any, and the communication journey is so long and hard and unknown for so many of us. A lot of them will point, they hum, they smile, they giggle. All of those pieces are parts of communication, but we are not taught to hear or see those as a way of communication. So,
Oftentimes, when you're turning around and you're looking at your child and a lot of the nonverbal type stuff, you're wanting to know, you're trying to understand. And it's a tough space because without the words, which we think is the majority of communication today, but the truth is, only 7% of communication is verbal in all of us.
we were talking about that the other night.
That's right. 93% is nonverbal. 93% is nonverbal. The body language, the gestures, all these different things that come up. These are things that because a lot of parents say to me, hey, I want to work on my kid. I want them to be talking and all this other stuff.
They want the words.
Right? They want the words. Mm-hmm. But I think that we're looking over some of the other forms of communication that are indeed happening even right now. Because some of those things are the lack of communication or the lack of understanding, rather, ends up in the space of meltdowns.
Oh,
Frustrations.
I think as they get older and they start, with any child,
Mm-hmm.
the older they get, the more they know what they want.
True.
And they, sometimes they learn ways to communicate that, and sometimes they struggle to communicate it in a way that we understand.
That's right, but the reality is all kids are communicating.
Absolutely.
All kids are communicating. Whether they have words or not, whether they're using any type of devices or anything like that, there is still some level of communication happening. And it's our job to really try to figure out what that looks like, okay, to be able to do that. So let's break down today a little bit around maybe some myths, right, around some of the nonverbal kids and the nonverbal communications that's happening, the tools that maybe can be used in that space to be able to do that, maybe the timeline and the emotional bandwidth that we have to stretch into that space, because it can be frustrating, that's for sure, right? But even more powerful, like there's some out of the box type of things that we've been talking about that we've found that isn't necessarily mainstream, but I think is important because it raises important points about not just communication, but how we're addressing some of the challenges that you guys as parents feel in this space, okay? So let's throw out the idea that communication is just about talking. It's not.
No.
Right? It's really about connection. Would you agree?
It's conveying a point.
Right. So Emily, tell us a little bit about how Georgia communicates. Like, how have you been able to communicate with her?
So when we got her diagnosis, she was about 2, and at that point she should have had some babbling, some verbal sounds other than like little hums. And it was really weird because she would she would make all kinds of noises at night in her bed. Happy, just like giggly, and it was really weird. But then like through the day she was so quiet, just quiet. And
I'm sorry, you're talking about the same person right now? She was quiet during the day?
She was quiet.
Oh.
Yeah. But she pointed.
Okay.
She had picked up on the pointing. And it was weird because it was the only time that she would isolate her finger. And it was always this Marie Antoinette, like...
you and you and you and you and you.
Yeah. So we decided that after we got the diagnosis, we probably needed to try and focus on sign language. which she did pick up on, and she does know more than she'll put out. We've caught her eavesdropping a few times, and we're just going, oh, no. Okay.
I swear to you guys, once Georgie learns how to talk, all our secrets are.
It's all downhill.
It's gonna be blasted.
But even with that, it just was not the best form of communication. So as she's gotten older, it's gotten really frustrating. At one point, we tried to get an AAC device, and that was really difficult because they basically handed us an empty machine and said, "Okay, you have to learn how to program it because you have to know how to do that." And there was like no help. Like, I called the rep. I'm like, I don't know the layers of language. I don't know how to do this. You know, like, I need somebody to at least show me how to create, I think they were calling it a thread or something like that. But then the time frame was up, and the insurance says you can either pay for it or you can send it back because there's been no success with it. So we sent it back, and there was a lot of frustration for all of us around that. And then we have been doing speech intensives.
No, let's before you continue, because I know this has been a journey, and you guys are working specifically in this area right now. Back to a little bit more about the AAC devices and all these different things. What you said was that they gave you a device, so they didn't show you, like, who would be showing you how to use the device? Like, who was supposed to be showing you? Because this is an important thing. I think that this is the other thing. There are tools.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to put my therapy hat on a little bit, because there are tools that we can add to the space to help facilitate those different things. And we had Deb Major, that was on, a speech therapist, in one of our earlier podcasts, that really opened that space for us a little bit when she talked about the importance of having the tools and really not waiting to have some of these things done. But the fact that you got a tool, didn't really get any.
There was no support.
Yeah, any support or guidance in using the tool.
Well, and previously we had encountered kind of the same thing. We were trying to transition from our early intervention program to the school, and we had asked about having a device because she was going to school. She's going to start preschool within the school. That's how it runs here. And they did a bunch of testing, and essentially at 3.5 years old, they were saying that kids that age don't use devices with success. So they said no. And that's when we went to find the other device through our private insurance, which we did with a speech and language pathologist here. And they, like I said, they handed us an empty device and said, you have to learn how to add these things and program it. So here it is. And here's the rep's number. You can bring it in. But the insurance wanted us to have a certain amount of success with it in a certain time frame to continue using it in order for them to fund the machine. Yeah.
I say that just because I can see how that can be frustrating. You have this device, you're trying to figure it out. You don't have the tools or the knowledge to be able to understand how to do that, with respect to this the speech therapists, as well as what we found out is that different speech therapists and their qualifications allow them to do different things. So you have to find somebody specifically that is able to understand the devices and be able to do that. And we are going to have somebody on one of our future podcasts that's going to talk more about those devices. But there's so many different, there are simple devices, there are so complex devices, there are all these different things. So that's unfortunate that was, do you think by any means, do you feel like that has limited or delayed that progress because you weren't able to do that?
Yeah, I do, because I believe that she could have used it, and I think there's always that hope, like, oh, maybe we just will make it through a certain hurdle and then she'll start really talking, or it's really hard to say until you get to a certain point. But to that point, once we found a therapist that could explain like where her specific trouble was, it made a lot more sense. Is she going to verbalize? Well, now, knowing what we know now, it's more of like an apraxia issue, which sometimes she will tell us everything under the sun. Look at this. No dog. stop it, leave me alone. I mean, it's usually
You're
just
bothering me.
You're bothering me.
I've heard that one.
Told I was ridiculous once, and I was like, ridiculous. Okay, for a child that doesn't speak, who says ridiculous?
But that was amazing. But that's still great. I mean, it's one of those bittersweets where you're like, I can't believe you just said that.
She wanted to be the mermaid in the tub, and I was being ridiculous, telling her it was time to get out because she was a prune. Whatever. So for us, you know, I feel like everything has just happened in an order and for a reason. We're at a point now where, you know, I'm doing what I do, looking outside the box to see what else is out there and available.
Right.
And we've had some pretty good success with that. And it's been really eye-opening.
And in the space of even doing this, like as you're going through this journey, because many parents, I think, feel, again, that guilt comes in, right? About, am I missing something? And they're trying so hard to communicate. Or sometimes it's very frustrating in this space where things aren't happening, or you need them to do something, or the meltdowns are happening, or whatever the case is. But there's even though you guys sometimes feel guilty because of how you respond to that space, or, you know that they're trying to say something, but you just can't seem to connect the dots. You know, do you ever feel that way in that space?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of times that breakdown comes from a number of things for us. You know, she's tired, she's hungry, she's hot, she's cold, you know, and it's like we've said before, you're just a constant in this like check the box mode, you know. And so there's things that we know are triggers and things that are not, that can kind of set off a meltdown. But in the midst of any of it, I mean, she's just 8, you know. There are other typical 8-year-olds have meltdowns.
And I think well, I know, right? As kids, yeah, you throw your tantrums, you know, but sometimes the tantrums, like we talk about, and I loosely say that because some of these things aren't tantrums, they're overstimulation type stuff that's happening in the space, there's sensory overloads, and there are ways that, to be quite honest with you, the meltdown is the communication.
Yep.
You know, and we're just not on the same wavelength to be able to do that. You know, the alongside those things, when we're digging deeper into the different forms, like you said, sometimes it's gestures, sometimes it's sounds. You know, I remember somebody saying, as babies, you know, you guys as moms, you guys know, even dads, you guys know, a child crying has different cries. You're like, that's the cry that they're hungry. That's the cry that, oh, they need changing. That's the cry, that's a mad cry. You know what I mean?
I want attention because I kind of got hurt.
Right.
But I'm really fine.
Oh, I love the one where, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, where the parent is holding the child and they slap the wall, but nothing's happened to the child, but the child cries, right? And like, what is that cry? You know, so there's a number of different things in that space, but it's a protective space a lot of times that's also happening. And in the space of these special needs kids, whether it's autism, whether it's FOXG1, whether it's all these different syndromes and genetics, we find that we're still trying to piece together the puzzle. And I think it's important that people understand, because what somebody's doing on one side, maybe somebody else is doing something else on another. Maybe that communication means something else in that other space, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of times I'm here, when I'm out with you and Georgie, a lot of times you will pick up on something and I'll be like, I have no idea what she's trying to tell me. I have no, you know, and then sometimes she's very, very clear and she's holding your hand and pointing and pulling in all these different ways, right? Sometimes another big communication thing I think that people have seen is that you'll get the smile. They might come and sit right next to you and rub up under you because they want attention or they're trying to tell you something, you know. I think one of the biggest things is of having patience in the space, and that can be hard.
I think patience, grace, and you know, sometimes we just have to let things calm down and just be in that space together, because there's a lot of times that even if it's just you and I, you know, sitting in a room and something else is happening, you know, like we get the same idea of what's going on. You know, it doesn't always require words. It doesn't always require, you know, the interpersonal vibe, I guess is the best way to describe it, is that there's a lot of communication just being in the same place.
Well, I think the other thing too is, and we can't talk about this without, again, talking about the fact that we have the ability to block off.
Oh, yeah.
block off. There's a
Well,
lot of things that's happening, and we block things off, and we can focus in on it. A
I
lot
think
of
that's
these
what we're
kids have
taught to
trouble.
do.
Right.
We're taught to, this is, if it isn't words, then it isn't communication, so we just are paying attention
Yeah,
to
but a
it.
lot of these kids, they can't block it off. There's so much coming in.
There's too much.
Right? There's too much coming in,
There.
so it's hard to really figure out, like when I'm tired, right? I'll mix my words up sometimes. So you're trying to find that word and you can't find that word, and you know how frustrating that is. So imagine how they feel sometimes, right? I looked up this, guys, and I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm gonna say it here. I looked up this study, and there was a connectivity between voice areas and reward centers, and they did this with kids with autism. And a 2013 brain study was looking at fMRI scans, and this was done in a biological research article. And they found that in kids with autism, the voice processing area was weakly connected to key reward centers. Okay, and this underconnectivity that they have in these areas was both on the left side and the right side of the brain. But the voice that they're hearing, they kind of tune it out almost, right? So we talk about the importance of sounds and frequencies and different things that really have been shown to help with neuroplasticity of the brain and open that space up to allow for them to grow and in those language areas and those other things. However, if there's an underconnectivity and we're not getting those things coming, those inputs coming in, they're not responding. They're not paying as much attention maybe to the speech that you're having or the sound that you're having. So very specific frequencies are being used to help with that bridge of communication. And that's an area that I thought was very fascinating because we were talking about the inclusion of, remember when we talked about intensives and we talked about physical therapy, speech therapy, and occupational therapists, and how important it is if these things are helping that we include these things even in those therapies, right? It's not like I'm working on my language and this is just it, right? Like we talk all day, right? We're talking to each other, we're communicating in all kinds of different ways throughout the entire day. Why do we think that they're not trying to do the same all the way through, right? And so this underconnectivity also makes it harder for them to form these strong communication and potential social skills, because part of communication is building some of those social skills, right? And so technically what's happening is that's affecting their ability for that language, right, to be able to do that. And then that links to behavior, because the weaker the brain connection, the more severe the communication challenges. So I thought that was an interesting study that I saw, right, in that space. And it kind of makes sense, because a lot of the different things, when they're trying to shut off different, some sounds don't affect them that way, or they're wanting those sounds. They're looking for those sounds, for those inputs.
So for us, it's really interesting because like loud machines, like four-wheelers and regular push mowers, no big deal. But the quiet commercial mowers send Georgia through the roof. Like we literally have to get in the car and leave the area until it's done. We can't drown it out. When she was little, our neighbors had people come and mow the lawn, and I just remember, like, before we figured out what the sound was, or that it was a sound, but then it started happening on the same day, and it was the day the guy came to mow. We were turning on showers. We had multiple TVs, radios, anything that we could turn up to try and drown it out.
That's interesting.
You can't do it, though, because there's a vibration that comes with it. And even from one yard to the next, in the house on the far end, farther away, she can still feel that.
You said vibration, and I got something else here that it also, there's something that some French researchers were also doing. And again, guys, let me be super clear with you guys. We're getting into the kind of out of box type of stuff. Okay, so they have different things that people have been doing, not just here in the US, but in Europe and in other parts of the world, where it's not necessarily accepted by some of these organizations. And I think that that's the controversial thing, right? But I'm going to say this, and please take it with a pint of salt. You've got to figure this out for yourself. But I truly believe that some of the research just hasn't caught up to what exactly we are seeing and what the outcomes are, because we are seeing some improvements in these areas, right? And now I'm talking about the verbal space, right? And through these different things, we are kids are progressing, and we're seeing drastic changes. However, because they may not be as duplicatable, or because of the research that's being done, or how the research is being done, which is very tough to do this research because there's so many variables that play a part.
I think that research sometimes can be thrown out because somebody didn't feel like it was credible, which in my opinion, you know, where I come from, I want to see it whether they feel like it's credible or not. Because if I'm not worried about it being credible, if it works for me, then that's where it's at.
And that's the point. But that's the space. I think a lot of people get very, you know, again, I'm in the healthcare field, and I feel like we've boxed ourselves in. We want to turn around and say this is it, and many times we just don't expand ourselves outside of that space. And sometimes it's sometimes it's a mixture of things. It's not even one or the other. It's a mixture of things that might be working, right? And we're going to talk about that in a second, because Georgia's doing some interesting things that are out of the box, and we're seeing some changes that are happening. But if we were to turn around and tell somebody that, I don't know that that's going to happen with everybody. I have no idea. But if it's working, why wouldn't you continue to do that, right? Especially in the area that you're working in.
Okay, being the crazy lady, okay?
I know, right? I know, right? But sometimes you have to explore that space, because your child is exploring the space, and exploration will allow for other things to happen, right? I always say the neurology happens with novel tasks. The increases and the growth that we have happen in normal tasks. So this particular research type stuff is done. We have a guy called Guy. I'm missing his name for a second here. It's Berard, I believe. He was looking at auditory type of information and processing of that stuff, and how that helped with communication. And he hasn't been, and some of the work that he's done has been rejected. But what I found is another lady by the name of Monica Zilboficius. Of course, I probably just totally killed that name. But ultimately, she operated in France, right? And some of it overlaps, I think, with some of the information that I was reading about him as well. And it was about neurofrequencies. So specific frequencies, because remember I said they drown out like the normal voice and speech. But specific frequencies are opening up these neurospaces, and they're seeing some brain type of activity in certain areas of the brain that are allowing for them to almost pay attention now. So that underconnectivity that I was talking about with these other neurofrequencies, it's allowing for them to actually pay attention, which is opening up that neurospace.
So it's really similar to what we started doing with our last intensive with the sound therapy. So they put like bone conducting headphones on, and they play certain classical songs because of the frequency that it hits frequently throughout that song. And it literally, you could see her calm down. And all of a sudden she could still hear us because they're bone conducting. So it's not like it's totally over the ear, you know, so she can still hear everything that's going on around her. But she was able to complete tasks without multiple, like, repetitive direction. It was like, you know, it was just such a calm, like, you could see it was calming to her. So yeah, there's a lot
There's
to
something
it.
there.
And I think that to that end, we need to pay attention to what sounds are around us, not just sounds like in the room, but like what kind of music are we putting out there? Because music, regardless of, you know, the different pieces that we would hear through a regular radio, they set different tones.
Absolutely. Well, you know this. Music, you feel differently with different types of music and different things like that. And you guys, again, Emily laughs at me. You know, I listen to all kinds of music, but I absolutely love drums and vibrations, right? And that type of tone and the frequency that brings for me. Horns, I mean, I grew up in the Caribbean, but horns and stuff like that. That music does something different for me. Just as how I talked about myself on the beach and being grounded through that space. That, you know, the other day we were at a park, right? An adopted park, and an individual was playing a handpan. which is similar to my steel pan, right? But it had that vibration sound, and I couldn't get it up. I literally was like, that sound for me was very captivating, and it made me pay attention, and it made me kind of calm in that space. But part of it was the vibration of the sound. So
But
there's
you
something with
noticed
that.
when we were there, there was, we had Georgie and her friend, and there were other kids there that had needs, and you could see that they were all just really enjoying themselves. But we weren't having the loud outbursting. We weren't having as much of like the flailing hands or feet. Everybody was just kind of calm and really enjoying themselves.
Yeah.
So I think, you can try different tones and sounds and things like that, even just looking it up on YouTube. But it's worth investigating because it's always case by case.
Absolutely. So this came off of their space, which is called the Sound of Hope. And please be very clear, I'm not endorsing any of these. We're just raising these awarenesses to different things that are out there that potentially you could, especially if you've tried different things and they haven't worked. And I truly believe if that's the case, it's okay to look outside the box a little bit because, like I said, some of these things, we are limited by what we understand by it. It doesn't mean that there isn't some validity there, but the understanding of it. Because what they said in their site is really that they focus on sound frequencies, rhythms, and melodies to promote the neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize and form these new neural connections, to enhance cognitive functions, improve emotional regulation, and support overall brain health. So they're really stimulating the various areas of the brain to be able to help with learning and memory and language and behavior, right? Because the lady talked about, I was so fascinated by this. The lady talked about herself, a client that her child who had autism had really, really bad behavioral type issues that was disrupting their entire family. And they were really at odds, a lot of guilt, a lot of pushback from the community that they were in because she was destructive. And she was really at her wit's end, and she happened to come across this individual, Monica. I won't say the name again. And that helped, opened the space to her. Well, what happened is in a couple of sessions, it bridged the gap. And she also had her child now calm down. Well, now, as she started calming down in her behavior, her learning started to improve, all these different things. She even entered into the classroom in a different way where they were able to turn around and now go back to school. She was able to now start having a couple friends. Like different things started opening up in her space, and there's a pattern that they use to be able to do that. So I really feel like I'm very interested in following up on this. And if you're game, there's something that I actually want to do with Georgia, and maybe we'll keep you guys abreast of how she progresses in the space when we are doing this, because in the other stuff that she's doing right now, and I want you to touch on that space because that's another controversial thing, but I think that we're already seeing
It's
changes. So tell people right now what's happening in the space that you guys are operating in.
So there's a controversial podcast out. A friend of mine suggested I listen to, and I actually put it off for a while. And I thought, okay, we were at the airport or something. I was like, it's going to be a while. So I turned it on, and to give credit, the telepathy tapes. And some of you may have heard of it. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend it, especially if you have a nonverbal child. But in that, they also talk about the way that a lot of these kids communicate, and it's through spelling or typing or RPM. It's all
And what's RPM?
You would ask me that.
I would.
Rapid prompting method.
There you go. Very good.
So I got curious because obviously Georgie is, for all intents and purposes, nonverbal, and I found that we had.
And let me interrupt you for a quick second. She's nonverbal, but we were talking about the fact that we really feel like she is trying to communicate so much right now. Like we had to turn around and you were looking for something to try to help facilitate that, because there's so many sounds and so many things coming out of her right now.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
So I I looked up the RPM just out of sheer curiosity. If all these kids in this that are being interviewed have the ability to do this, then I would imagine Georgia could too. She's pretty physically capable. So I found a lady here in Utah that teaches it, and we went and did an appointment with her, and I still am trying to wrap my head around the whole thing. Because as we had tested her last year for school for her IEP, she basically couldn't do the tests. So they automatically assumed that we needed to be doing preschool work because she couldn't identify numbers, letters, colors, shapes. So that's where we were doing school last year. And it was like, she never wants to do school. She never wants to interact in those lessons. And it, at that point, I'm just going, well, I guess she just doesn't care. Like I can't force her. There's no point in creating frustration around that. So we go to this first meeting, and not only does she know her alphabet, not only does she know her numbers, her colors, her shapes, she also spelled off 7 continents, which is what we learned with the boys last year. We did mapping and whatnot. So
and she's right there with you when that's happening. When you're homeschooling
like
your other
saying,
kids.
Hey Georgia, these are the 7 continents. She's just soaking it up. So the teacher says, "Did you know there's 7 continents?" And she nods. Yes. Okay. Sure. Maybe she does. Maybe she doesn't. Then she spells them off. Okay, that's a little like chills. There was one week that they did math. She knows how to add and subtract. That's all.
Now, what are you going to say to people who are saying, well, again, the controversial part. And so just so that you guys know, the RPM method, the rapid prompt method, the teacher or the parent asks questions and gives the child some choices. And the child will point to letters, pictures, words on a board to answer, right? Depending on the questions being done. And over time, the child might spell out full sentences or write their goals, etc., etc. But that's kind of let's just say from a 30,000 foot view, that's kind of what's happening. And I'll tell you, I was there. I was sitting down trying to understand what was happening, technically. And, but yeah, it was a lot of pointing and all this other stuff that was going on. Now, what would you say to somebody, because it's very controversial, that they say that it doesn't have enough proof to show that it works with everyone?
So a lot of the controversy comes from, is it their thought?
Right.
So our last session, the teacher gave Georgia a picture, and it was a picture of kids in Kenya in a classroom. There was one teacher and a whole bunch of kids, I don't know how many, wearing red shirts. And obviously they're happy, they're all smiling, right? So the teacher talks about where Kenya is, and Georgia, do you know where Kenya is? Africa. Okay, so here's more brain bending. And then the teacher says, well, what do you think about their red shirts? Why would they all wear red shirts? Do you think they should wear red shirts? Her response was no. And the teacher says, okay, what color of shirt should they wear? She spells the word orange. Okay, so she thinks they should be wearing orange shirts. Then we, go through a little bit more. While they're at school, they eat lunch, and, she went over a couple of different facts, like they have to walk 5 miles to school, and they have to walk 5 miles to go home. And is that a long walk? And Georgia's like, no. The teacher says, do you would like to walk 5 miles to school? Yeah.
She probably walks 5 miles because she keeps going. Yeah, she keeps going all day.
Yeah. So that was no surprise. But then the teacher talks about how they eat maize and beans. And the teacher says, do you know what maize is? And she spells corn. But, we're in Utah, so we have a lot of Hispanic things, and maize is sometimes referenced as corn. So I wasn't
But my big thing
surprised.
is this, though. What is the thing that you told me after the first session? What did you tell me after you found out that, maybe she knows a little bit more about what's going on?
She knows everything that's going on. She can communicate all of that.
She can. In that space.
In her thoughts.
Right.
In the way that
But what did you tell me? I want to know if you remember.
I don't remember.
I know, because your mind was blown. Let me tell you guys. Her mind was blown. For that whole week, Emily was like, I don't know, I don't understand.
I'm bracing myself
she knows
for tomorrow.
This is what she said to me, I feel guilty that I did not know that my child knew this.
I did. I still do.
I know.
I feel like I second guessed her.
That's right. But how would you know?
Well, that was my defense.
Right? There's no way for you to know. But my point is this, guys. Don't get so stifled in a box that we're missing other things that may be happening around us that are not necessarily in this box that everybody's telling us that there is. That's the only thing I want everybody to get. Whether it's the RPM, whether it's, the AIT, all the different things that we're using, the communication devices. The thing about it is this: you have to figure out whether or not these things are working and how your child is responding. Now, they may be, and other things at different times might work as well. At that time, maybe, I don't know, if Emily had the support and you got the AAC device, would she have been ready? I don't know. She was pointing. Maybe she would have been ready for a simpler AAC device that just says yes or no or all done or a couple of different things, and then moved into those. Because I'll tell you this, one thing's for sure, Georgie absolutely is understanding what we're saying because her response is in accordance to what we're asking and those different things, right?
It has been for a long time.
Yes, but the idea that supporters believe that RPM, it gives the kids a voice. Otherwise, they don't know. If it takes you one step closer to that space, whether it works or not, especially if you don't have that right now, is it something? I don't know. You have to make that decision for yourselves if that's something that you would want to turn around and do. It appears to be that, and Emily, will get a lot of feedback from people who are like, that doesn't make any sense. That's not going to work. Well, at the end of the day, she's seeing some changes. And what I'm seeing, the definite change that I'm seeing is her ability to even try to communicate even more, more clearer, more often.
Not necessarily using RPM, but she's using more of her signs. Like, she's signing more.
Yeah, but even when I'm on the phone with you, she's babbling in the back. Like,
well,
I can always hear her. But she's but before, while she was saying a couple of things here and there, I don't think that she was trying to speak as much. Yeah. So even if this bridges another gap, even if this bridges a gap long enough to do an AAC device that creates now the ability for her to hear the sound, touch the, create that association,
but how much
all
more
those
simple this is, and why I feel like I need to chase it down, is essentially what she will end up doing is texting. I mean, we text all day long. We have swipe. We,
Well, she already knows how to use this phone.
Yeah,
Jesus.
So really, just we just need to get her a phone.
Yeah. And again, the last thing you mentioned this, and just to wrap up a little bit, like the point of the telepathy tapes, and I was supposed to look up the reference as to who actually put that out. I can't remember.
Kai Dixon.
What's that?
Kai Dixon.
Kai Dixon. And so the thing about that, what was interesting to me in that space was that I truly believe that what's happening is that nonverbal side, right? And nonverbal side that we're picking up on, or whatever the case is, but it's trying to answer the question, can people, especially kids, parents, communicate without using the words? Well, the studies that were done, they're showing where kids were put in different rooms, and the parent is shown a picture or given a thought to focus on, or some kind of drawing, and the kids are able to respond or highlight, like it's a tree, or the drawing that was done, or the thought that was going on, or give the answer that matches the question that was being done, and they're in a completely different room. Now, they've done a lot of research on this. Again, guys, controversial, because telepathy is controversial, right? But you guys know, like, we all have gut feelings about things. We all have these other kind of, like, people say, the sixth sense. All these different things. I don't know how that's happening exactly. I'm only on the third session. You're way further ahead. But I'm still, looking into this. But ultimately, I thought it was very interesting because I do believe that at some level, there is some nonverbal type things that we're picking up on, and also what else is it that they're able to do in this space that we aren't able to do because we are so focused on our verbal language.
And as you move through the episodes, you'll hear more about all of that. But as a parent with a child who doesn't communicate typically, there's that word again, it is worth the listen just for that, because there's a lot of insight and a lot of things that you've probably already experienced that
Can't
speak
explain,
to
or
this.
you can't
Yes.
explain that space. But ultimately, even if you played in the space, even if you took some of the things that were happening and you started playing in that space, how would that progress, right? And what would happen, to be able to facilitate and bridge those gaps that we're seeing neurologically in the space. So, I told you guys it's going to be a little controversial, talk today. I mean, and it's just about raising the awareness
See,
around the
that
space.
happened
Thank you. See that? You knew what I was thinking? That's so great. Let's keep spending more time together, and you're gonna do exactly what I'm thinking, but I can't find it. But yeah, so thank you again for joining us today on the Breaking Podcast episode. Thank you, Emily, for your insight, for sharing with us some of those things. She's with the things that we try to investigate or learn or talk to individuals that are doing different things. That's what we're going to bring to you guys, raise the awareness, raise questions, anything you want to add before we sign off?
If there's something that's out of the box that you're just, I want to see it, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm very intrigued, and I love to entertain some of these things, because if it works, it works. I'm not worried about what the rest of them have to say, but I can't find everything.
And then don't be afraid to play in the space, because I want to hear from you guys. You guys need to send in your comments and tell us what you guys have tried, what maybe out of the box thing that you guys have done that has worked, or what combination of things. Because believe it or not, a lot of parents are really struggling in this space. They've never heard their child speak. I remember there's an episode of, this is so funny, an episode of it's a medical show, Angels Memorial Hospital, Code Black, and there's one where the mom said to the doctor, "I've never heard my child's voice. She's never said my name. She's never said I love you." And it broke her, and she loved her child.
I think a lot of parents have that.
Yeah, right. And so in that space, what happened is she would talk to the phone though. And she would text and talk to the phone. And ultimately what they did is basically they put the mom in a different room and had her respond. And now the child spoke to her through the phone. And it was the first time she literally said to the phone, she says, "I love you, Mom," into the phone, and the mom just broke down. It was a beautiful episode, I'm just saying. However, again, I hope that this touched somebody out there. I hope that it opened your eyes to something else, maybe something that you might be able to try, something that you may be able to share with someone else that helps them really bridge the gap that we have here in this world of communication. And remember, all kids are communicating. We just need to be patient. We need to be open. We need to start listening and looking as to what it is that they're doing. So this is another podcast episode. Happy to have you guys join us. And we'd love for you guys to read in the comments below all about join us at our website, NeuroPediaConnect.com, or join our Facebook group to continue this conversation as we continue to share with you guys what we're finding out, what we're doing, how we're managing and supporting this community of parents in their quest and in their journey. And so right now, we'd like to sign off, but don't forget, like, comment, and subscribe, right? Because remember, your kids are communicating and you are not alone. Take care.